Hello and welcome to episode 123 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, Sweden lowers the output of 2 nuclear reactors because the wholesale price of electricity was getting too cheap. Why? Lots of wind power was generated. Did we call that here on the show? Yes, we did. Are we geniuses? Yes. Am I willing to drop my expensive podcast microphone in response? Not at this time.
Temperatures in the UK have reached 40 degrees Celsius for the first time ever. That's right, the UK has for the first time in its history achieved beach weather.
Well, with the humidity, Brian, at 18%, I'd say it's more like desert weather. You know, like Las Vegas, where they gamble? Appropriate, since the whole world seems to be gambling on the climate. Anyway, President Biden is set to declare a climate emergency this week. If only he thought of this earlier, Joe Manchin might have come on board.
Russia has invoked the force majeure clause to stop exporting gas to Germany. Germany's response, you can't do that. To which Russia replied, yes, we can. Then Germany said, no, you can't. Then Russia said, yes, we can. And this is still going on.
All that and more on this packed edition of the Clean Energy Show. Oh, Nelly, Brian, I'm hot and moist, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, how's that going over there at Shea Whittingham?
Well, the Shea Whittingham air conditioner is running a bit more than I expected. And you know what? We survived years without using the damn thing hardly at all. Because we're at almost 2,000 feet elevation. We're in an arid prairie climate. And it gets cool at night. It goes down to 13 Celsius, stuff like that. And you can cool your house down quite easily.
Yeah, and your house, as we've discussed many times, is super insulated, very thick walls, so that helps with both heating and cooling.
Yeah, it does. And huge airflow, fans in the window, that type of thing. And no, the air conditioner is running a lot. And it's, I'm sad about that because I know it's expensive. I know it's using electricity.
Yeah, well, I'm still working on a plan for my house. I was kind of the same. I never thought we needed air conditioning. Now I've succumbed to the reality that we will. So my dream is to do geothermal. So maybe I can do that next summer and then we can heat and cool the house. But as of now, we don't have air conditioning. It was crazy hot for a couple of days there. It looks to be maybe improving. We thought about getting one of those portable air conditioners, that sit on the floor and, hose to the window. We don't have the right kind of windows for them. You really need the windows that slide up and down or slide left and right. We've got the kind that open outwards, casement windows. So, it's not a great fit. So hopefully we can survive the summer.
You could jerry-rig that, though, with a piece of cardboard if you were willing.
Yeah, and people on the internet use a piece of plexiglass and cut a hole in it. I don't want to do anything that elaborate. But also, too, I watched an interesting video on YouTube where a guy was complaining about the efficiency of those portable air conditioning units. So people used to have the kind that sat in the window. That was the common kind, right? Well, It turns out those ones are way more efficient.
Really?
So if you get a window unit, they're actually better because in the window unit, the hot parts of the air conditioner sit outside the house. Most of the air conditioner sits outside the house. And there's a lot of hot components that generate a lot of heat.
Oh, okay.
But they're sitting outside the house. So when you have a portable unit that sits on the floor, all the heat elements of the air conditioner are in the room. So the cooling element has to work a little bit harder. So the portable ones often have 2 BTU things listed on them. Like it'll say 10,000 BTUs of cooling, and then in brackets it'll say 7,500 BTUs of cooling. Because that's the actual, it's the theoretical is 10,000, but the actual is more like 7,500. So there are kind that have 2 tubes that go to the window, and those are a little bit more efficient because one sucks and one blows. But yeah, that was news to me that obviously they still work and there's other advantages to them. You can wheel them from room to room, but turns out the window ones, which are even cheaper too, are the more efficient option.
I bought one
and they're
for
quieter too. With the portable ones, you really hear the compressor kicking in and out. Yeah. But again, the window unit, that stuff sits outside the house, so they tend to be quiet.
Oh, I see. Okay, I always envied those portable ones and thought they'd be a good idea. Now I'm thinking differently. I had a window air conditioner. I can't remember how much I paid for it. I found it at a garage sale at our first home, which was this A-frame 2-bedroom house, and upstairs were the bedrooms, and it was a wartime house. And I had it in there just refrigerator cold quite easily. Yeah. It did a really good job of a 100 square foot room. And even though I paid like $20 for it or something, I was really happy about that. And then a bird built a nest in there underneath of it, sort of and my cat came into the room every morning and started swiping at it for months. We thought she'd gone crazy. And eventually we found the nest, and guess what the nest was made out of? Some of her hair that we had brushed off in the yard and let float away. They used it for their nest, which was adding insult to injury to my poor cat. So, and then she didn't believe us. I always believe a cat, people, because she found a mouse under the sink once in our old house. So, yeah, if a cat is interested in something, chances are there's something there. They're not losing their minds. They're pretty smart. Brian, you crazy bastard. You are having a soiree on the weekend. I got the invitation for it, and I'm going to decline it here on the show. And let me give you my reasons.
Sure.
I don't want to go.
It's a well-known fact that you don't like to go places or talk to people.
No,
so
but
I'm not
here's
surprised.
your situation. You survived COVID, you and your partner, and you're walking around like superheroes with capes on, like nothing can affect you. And now you're having a soiree with a bunch of people. And my doctor says avoid crowds. Do not take any risks because you are within a breath of dying. And I've gained pandemic weight. I don't want to be seen by people. I've got all kinds of reasons why I don't want to go there.
The key phrase here is backyard soiree. It's the summertime, so we're going to have everybody outside, and we're feeling that
It sounds safe, but if it becomes a COVID super spreader event, I mentioned it here on the show. You're not going to get away with it. No, that's exciting that you're doing that, and it's also the first time anyone's doing that. But I'm just not ready. I'm sorry. I'm sticking at home, and we've been lucky here. We haven't got it. I've got school kids, and including one in elementary school, and yeah.
Although I will add that even if there was no COVID and it didn't exist, you probably wouldn't come anyway.
Well, if I was like 1,000 pounds lighter, I think I would. If I felt like presentable, that I wouldn't break your chairs or something like that. I broke a chair at a friend's house once about 10 years ago at an Oscar party. Very embarrassing when you break somebody's chair. It was a nice chair, too. I think it was a little IKEA number. Obviously not supportive, not structurally sound. But that's always embarrassing when you break a chair. I wish you good luck with it, and perhaps I will send a table over with a picture of me on it or something and some information about myself.
Sure.
People can have conversations with the cutout. I don't know. I feel bad about not going, but I'm just not ready, and this is really clear to me. So I've been in the pool. The pool reached 91 degrees Fahrenheit. And I go by Fahrenheit when it comes to pool temperatures because all the manuals online do. So I've been kind of used to that over the last 22 years.
And this is you have solar heating for your pool.
I have solar heating for the pool, yes. And I spent a lot of time in the pool because, there's two advantages, Brian. One, of course, is it makes you cool temperature-wise on a hot day. And
even if it's 91?
Well, in the mornings and evenings, that's a pleasant temperature, okay? It's like, a little more than 10 degrees short of a hot tub. 15 degrees short of a hot tub, I think. 106 is something like that. In the afternoon, not so much. And it becomes like unpleasant. It's a bad situation. But in the mornings and evenings, it's nice. And I'm weightless there, Brian. I'm weightless. I cannot drown in my pool. If I could get drunk and pass out and I'm too fat to drown, I just float now. And imagine what I would do in salt water. I would I'd be sitting on the surface of the water, I think, floating around. So, I spend way too much time in the pool. My face looks like a baseball glove, a weathered baseball glove from all the sun, even with the 50 block after, 8 hours of sitting in there. I've got really wonderful speakers set up. I've listened to podcasts. I've run my whole operation from the pool. I'm an idiot. Admit it. One day I hope to podcast from the pool if it can be technologically arranged. So we have a story this week from Bloomberg about Swedish nuclear. That is a huge story, huger than anyone, I think, realizes. And my point was, and I was talking to you about this earlier, is that Bloomberg is the only one who covered this story because I searched it and I searched it again today, a few days later. Bloomberg is doing some excellent, because people often ask us who is a good source for the information that we're getting. Well, Bloomberg's excellent, but it's really expensive. I mean, you were on the Apple system and they were wanting to charge you a fortune for it, right?
Yeah, so I subscribe to Apple News. And so, yeah, like a story will come up from Bloomberg and you'll want to click on it. Oh, this is great. I want to read this story. But not everything is included with Apple News, which is super annoying. So you click on a Bloomberg story and it says subscribe for $47 a month to Bloomberg, which
is a fortune
high,
for a newspaper subscription.
Yeah, I think you and I both sort of signed up for the cheap deal for 3 months, and we'll see how that goes and see if they offer us a cheaper rate by the time that's over.
Yeah, but I'm thinking even the cheaper rate's going to be really bad. There's a student rate for $10, and that's American funds. So that's pretty pricey. I'm paying $4 a month for New York Times as a Canadian. And I Washington Post was a similar option for me. I was hoping Bloomberg would have something that I would, because they really do have a lot of climate stories that are done by reporting that a lot of people, and a lot of the deal with the climate fight that we cover is economics. I'm not an economist, you're not, but a lot of it is basic economics. And that's kind of the thesis of our show, is that the things that we talk about are going to displace other things on cost alone, let alone the need for it. So,
yeah, well, Markham Hislop, who we sometimes talk about on the show, Canadian journalist in energy, he had a guy from Deloitte, the accounting firm, on his podcast recently. And that was why he had him on, because it's like you often get into, arguments about, the economics about all this. And a lot of people just don't believe it.
Yeah, which is weird.
If an accounting firm is on board with the economics of it, and, really there's tremendous opportunity if you don't just bury your head in the sand and say we're going to stick with the past.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable how some people don't. I got into an argument with my son again about the cost of nuclear and such, and he's spouting. It's not that he necessarily believes it, but he's surrounded by a lot of information in the young, young Twitterverse and Reddit and TikTok, where people have a lot of their climate. They want climate action, but they're also got a lot of their own ideas that I don't think are correct. And he's not really grasping the idea of the economics of it. Of course, he doesn't grasp any economics. He doesn't understand. He wants a hailstorm because he's never seen hail. And I said, well, do you want your insurance to go up by 200%?
Yeah.
They seed the clouds in Calgary. And we were chasing a thunderstorm that eventually hit your cottage on Friday night, which is hilarious. But we just, he went out and chased it. So we went out and chased it. My daughter and I chased him chasing the storm because I didn't want him to die. And, we saw some remarkable sights. The storms this year are crazy. And you know how many tornado warnings we're getting? I got one because it was ice cream night on Sunday. So we took the family for a blizzard at Dairy Queen, and we were stuck, of course, because it was a heat wave in this long lineup at Dairy Queen where you can't leave. And guess what happens? I get a tornado warning on my phone, and I'm stuck in this lineup, unable to go anywhere, thinking I'm going to die for a blizzard. And by the way, I recommend the cone, the Nestle Cone Blizzard. I tasted my daughter's.
Ironically, in the winter, you can also die by a blizzard.
Yes. How did James die? Oh, he died by a blizzard. Oh, was it? What time of the year was it? July. That would be hilarious. Anyway, I wanted to ask you, because you had the storm eventually came to you, and which is like 2 hours away, and you had a massive power outage.
Yeah, wicked storm out at the cottage, which is in southeastern Saskatchewan. And it was a nasty one. All kinds of lightning, thunder, a little bit of hail, really strong winds, and trees, a lot of trees uprooted in towns nearby. So the power went out at about midnight when the storm was at its apex, and didn't come back on until 2 p.m.
Ooh.
2 in the afternoon, 14 hours with no power. So, we have a gas barbecue with a side burner, so we were able to boil water and make coffee and tea with that. So, long live oil and gas, I guess.
And you just got that last year, didn't you?
Yeah, we didn't have it before then.
Well,
So
thank goodness. It paid for itself right there.
yeah, I mean, maybe we could have started a campfire, I guess,
Oh,
and,
sure. I
and
mean,
boiled
like
water,
a
but
caveman or something. I mean, you could do that. But really, it's quite primitive. So has this got you thinking differently about building the new cottage, about what you might want to include, such as battery backup or,
yeah, and
vehicle
there's
to
always
load?
been lots of power outages out at the cottage because it's a small community. It's a little bit isolated. Everything's thousands of miles apart here in Saskatchewan. Everything's very spread out. So these kinds of power outages are quite common in these kind of rural areas. So absolutely, if we build a new cottage, the hope is to have some battery backup. Because we went for a walk during the power outage that morning, and about every 10th cottage you'd hear a generator running,
Really?
which again, it's always the unpleasant fossil fuel sights, sounds, and smells out of the cottage that really annoy me. But there's already lots of people that have generators because this is a problem.
Wow. Do your immediate neighbors have generators?
No, nobody right close by.
Right.
But, and there might be some with battery backup, but you can't hear those. So who knows?
Right. That's possible. Now, I'm wondering, you drive a Tesla. Tesla is eventually going to have a vehicle to load or vehicle to grid type of thing, right? I mean, they've talked about that. And other people like Hyundai and Ford, they're all doing it. What's taking Tesla so long? Are they just worried about other things?
No, they've never been as big on that technology as everybody else, and probably because they have a robust business selling batteries for the home. So they would prefer that people buy batteries for the home rather than the vehicle to grid. So, I think they will implement it someday, but they're not in a particular hurry to do that.
So what was your car charge when the power went out?
Yeah,
was it
fortunately,
charging?
it was about 88% because we had the level 2 charger on for 5 hours. So
Yeah.
if we hadn't done that the previous day, we would have been in slight trouble. But it came on at 2, so we could have,
It was
it wouldn't have been a
a
problem.
really weird storm because it was this small, tiny little compact thing 12 hours earlier, like at noon, and it hit you at like midnight. And it's just,
Yeah.
this existed the whole day and never went away, which is not like the storms we get around here.
And we didn't have, vehicle to grid or vehicle to home from the car, but, our phones did start to run out of charge.
Really?
So we were able to charge our phones in the car.
That's nice. It's nice without turning on any gas to do that, too. You could just plug it in. No, other people, if it was me, and I lived there and was a regular person who went there and there was power outages, I might buy a 12-volt inverter for the car, that you would hook up to your 12-volt battery and get
Yep.
maybe
Get a little bit of
1,000
juice.
watts.
Yeah.
That's interesting, too. Yeah. So, plus I've got, my camper has a little solar panel and inverters, too, so we can charge things, but we don't use it very often. But that's interesting. So, what else is new with you this week?
Well, I thought we didn't quite explain how Canada's carbon tax works last week. We spoke a little bit about how we're getting rebate checks now. Like you and I, as like our family, will get about $1,100 each. But that might be confusing to people who haven't heard about how our carbon tax scheme works. That how is it a carbon tax if they're sending out money to people? So I don't know. Can you take a shot at explaining how this carbon tax
You
works?
putting it on me? Well, the idea is
Well, I can do it if you want.
the theory is to affect consumer behavior,
Yeah.
right? And that's what the carbon tax is for, is to affect consumer behavior. So if you and by the way, I speak of my son way too often on this show, but he was at work with all the other young engineering students working at their summer job with the city, and they're all talking about the rebate checks that they didn't know were coming because they're young people. What do they know? They don't know what's going on. They didn't know this was coming. Suddenly they've got a few $100s in their account from the carbon tax rebate, and they're all going to blow it on frivolous things. So, but still, I mean, I would say put it into insulation on your home or, something like that, an upgrade of the weather stripping on your doors. But the idea is to affect consumer behavior. If something is expensive, well, this is what they do with tobacco, right? They tax tobacco, not because they're necessarily taking that money and putting it into the health effects that tobacco causes directly, but they tax it to discourage you from using it as much. And they're
And you'll
doing
be
that
less
with,
of a burden on the healthcare system.
so they've calculated what the price of carbon is per ton, and we're slowly ramping up to that. It started at $10 a ton. It doubled to $20. Now it's at $40, I believe. And from now until, I don't know, 2028 or 2030 in Canada, they're going to ramp up that carbon tax on things. And you'll see it on your electricity bill because the power companies will have to, if they don't have clean power, they'll have to raise their rates and account, to account for that. And you'll see it built into the gas price and just in manufacturing too, I guess, and certainly in the oil sector.
Yeah, so to take one example, so the cost of gasoline at the pump is going to go up because of the added carbon tax. So this is a pressure on consumers. That's going to cost you more. And that's why we get the rebate check to help compensate us for rising costs of gasoline and other carbon kind of related things. But the goal is, the hope is then that we as consumers, instead of choosing the polluting carbon thing, because it now costs more, we'll choose the cleaner option. So in an ideal scenario, if you have cleaned up your life and you've got solar panels, you've got an electric car, you're not burning any carbon, that rebate that you get from the government goes straight into your pocket. And that's what they want all of us to do.
And that's almost where you and I are, because we have solar panels on a roof, we drive electric, and we're pocketing more of that money because we're not actually using as much electricity, or in my case, maybe as much natural gas because I've got a sun-tempered home and things like that. And yeah, it's been proven. The province of British Columbia has had it for years, and there was data that proved that it worked and it wasn't debilitating for, debilitating. So, Brian, I thought we would talk about some of the previous stories that we've discussed and some updates that are pertaining to that. What's going on with Russia?
Yeah, so as we reported last week, Germany is quite worried that Russia was not going to restart gas supply to Germany. Germany uses a lot of gas from Russia. There was that whole episode where Canada had to send them a turbine for the pipeline that they needed. So the sanctions for Russia had to be momentarily lifted in Canada. Lots of people were upset about that, particularly Ukrainians. But there's a yearly maintenance that goes on every year about now, and Germany was making noise like this is not going to happen. And then a couple of days ago, yes, Russia indeed invoked force majeure, a sort of a act of God clause in the contract that says, yeah, we're not going to be able to supply you guys with gas. We got too much shit going on. But breaking news just before we started to record, and this is from Reuters, and this is an exclusive from them, so this is not yet widely reported, but Reuters has sources, and they believe that Russia will start supplying the gas again very soon.
This has been a political hot point in Canada, hasn't it? The two opposition parties federally haven't been happy about that. It's kind of like a no-win situation. Governments get in that situation where it's equally bad no matter what you do. But I guess they went with their allies on this one, and not to be an apologist for them.
No, but it's I'm not a big fan of most politicians, but you do have to recognize the fact that even if you do the job perfectly, there's always 30 or 40% of the population that's going to hate you no matter what.
Yeah. So let's do something fun for a second here. The Onion has a piece entitled "Americans Explain Why They Prefer Gas Over Electric Cars." This, of course, is satire. It's not real. So they had a slideshow and with quotes from different people. And I'll start with the first one. "I think we're rushing in before we even really know what electricity is," says Irene Mooney, seamstress. "My gas car can go forward and reverse. Can electric cars do that?" Ellie Slater asks, an interior designer. "It'd be disrespectful to the troops not to use the gas they died for," says another person. Getting a bit dark there. "The power strip I use for charging devices is already too crowded," says someone. That's too true. I deal with that every day. "I'm not sure electric cars will blow up as cool in movies," something that you and I can appreciate, and Absolutely. You especially, who've blown up a car.
I blew up a car one time. It was super
fun.
For
a movie.
Yeah.
It's fun. So did I, actually. Well, I was part of it. My job is 40 miles away, and I don't have an extension cord that long, says someone. And finally, I'm not really sure why, but I regard it as an existential threat to my entire way of life, says Gary Tovar, realtor. So, yeah, the Onion's getting it on the things that we talk about.
Yeah, and it is, surprisingly poignant because it's true. There are very little legitimate reasons not to go electric, but people are balking at the idea anyway.
Saying the dumbest things.
Okay, so this next story is from Next Big Future, and I wanted to talk about this just because I thought it was a fun story, but also shout out to Brian Wong, who I went to high school with. Brian has this blog called Next Big Future. It's been going on for many years. I don't think he listens to the podcast, but shout out anyway. Brian Wong did the math, and he thinks that the Tesla Model Y is already the best-selling car in the world. And, he had to make some assumptions to get to this figure, but Tesla just production numbers and everything, and it was mostly kind of poor because there were shutdowns in China. But then in June, they were able to ramp things back up again, so they had a huge production month in June. So if you extrapolate the production from Tesla in June to the whole year and to what Toyota is producing, because currently the Toyota Corolla is the best-selling car in the world, but they've had declines recently in their sales as Teslas are ramping up. So it's inevitable that Tesla's going to surpass them as the most popular car in the world, but it's possible we're at that right now.
That is fast, isn't it? The Y really is going to be popular, as Elon Musk predicted it would be, that it would far dwarf sales of the Model 3, even though it's much more expensive.
It's like 3 times the cost of the Toyota Corolla, but with, declining sales from Toyota and rapidly increasing sales from Tesla. And, whatever Teslas they can make, they can sell because they've got a huge waiting list. So as soon as they produce them, they're immediately sold. So I think that these numbers.
So
could
you're
be
telling
correct.
me that there's 2 famous Brians from your graduating class in high school?
Absolutely. Campbell Collegiate, class of 82.
Who'd have thunk?
Me and Brian Wall.
Must have been a good class. Congrats to your teachers if they're still alive. And double congrats if they're listening to this podcast, which I hope they are. Nelson on Twitter asked if this was you. He posted a picture of a guy charging a AMC Gremlin, which he's confused. What did you drive? What was the weird car?
Yeah, I had a 1972 AMC Gremlin. It came up on the podcast a couple of years ago because I bought a Tesla, and I've only owned 2 American cars in my life: the 72 AMC Gremlin.
Well,
and
hats
the Tesla
off to
Model 3.
Nelson for picking that up. That's something that must have lodged in his mind all those many, many months ago. But yeah, there's a picture of a guy from a power company in Seattle hooking up an AMC Gremlin electric car that was run on what kind of batteries? Like lead acid batteries.
24 6-volt
huge
batteries.
weight of batteries where the engine would be. And he's powering it up to basically a parking meter that has a plug-in on it with a very primitive cord. He seems happy to be doing it. He's not a young guy. He's an old guy who came up with this idea. And the thing sold for, 24 rechargeable 6-volt batteries, which is like golf cart batteries, which is something that we use in RVs sometimes because, I don't know, it just works better. So 50 miles of range at highway speeds, that ain't bad. I mean, that's for the time.
Yeah, that's not too bad at all. And in the picture here, the charging plug goes into the middle of the back of the hatch, which is where the gas tank was.
And it sold for $3,500 in 1973. So thanks for sending that to us, Nelson. That's kind of interesting. He also sent us something else, and I wanted to mention that. So he sent us an opinion article on how the whole Joe Manchin thing needs to be forgotten, and we should move on and fight strong and hard for the climate. And the point was that there's plenty of good news out there, including this in the article that said that there's retired coal plants across the United States are finding new life as hosts for utility-scale renewable energy projects. And just in Illinois alone, 9 former coal plants are set to become solar farms and battery storage facilities. So 9 former coal plants in Illinois alone are becoming solar farms with battery storage. That's amazing.
Yeah, so the infrastructure and the grid connection is already there. So absolutely, why not just
that's
change
the
it
point.
to green?
The main
energy?
advantage of these stations provide over other large renewable energy infrastructure is their existing connections to the grid. That's kind of what's been sort of the Achilles heel for renewable energy deployment is the fact that you have to build up new grid connections. And so transitioning coal plants to clean energy hubs addresses 3 issues with wind and solar in one. First, coal plants' existing connections to the grid allow renewables to be delivered to cities and suburbs, and constructing expensive new power lines and substations is all taken care of. So I won't go into that any further, but we will get on with the show now.
Okay, so temperatures have hit 40 degrees Celsius for the first time in recorded history in the United Kingdom. And I think we have a clip.
Breaking news, and the UK is experiencing its hottest ever day after the Met Office issued a red extreme heat warning in an area stretching between London, Manchester and York.
So, yeah, I traveled through Europe in 1994. That's when I went to Utrecht, which we talked about last week.
Sounds good again.
I started in Paris. I was shooting stuff for Utopia Cafe. A shout out to our friend Stephen Hall, who hired me to work on that TV show. And we started in Paris and then traveled up to Norway and then kind of back down and ended up in Switzerland. But I bring it up because that was 1994. And at the time, that was the hottest summer in recorded history in Europe that summer. And it was blistering hot in the mid 30s the whole time. I was there for about 5 weeks, and it was quite extreme. But, as we know, 1994 was a long time ago. There's been many record-breaking summers since then as the climate continues to heat up. So, yeah, this time it's the UK. This is nasty. They've never hit 40 Celsius.
What do you think was different when you were there
because
because of the heat? How were the cities acting and people acting? Were they like, dousing themselves with water? I read that only 3% of the UK has air conditioners. Because remember the heat wave last year in the Pacific Northwest of North America, in BC and Washington and so forth, because they have a cool, temperate, well, almost British-like climate from the ocean, that fewer people had air conditioners. Well, 3% is very low, and it's really hot in the UK today.
No, there's a lot of the same kind of problems. Like, a lot of the places we went did not have air conditioning back in 94. And in the UK, a lot of some of their infrastructure is crumbling the way it did in the West Coast.
Oh, they didn't have air conditioning?
Yeah, staying in hotels. No, well, we went to one in Copenhagen, which is, the northern part, which again stays more cool the more northerly you get. And when we checked into the hotel, they warned us. They said, okay, the hotel does have air conditioning, but it can't keep up. That your room is going to be hot, and we've got it cranked on maximum, and that's the best we could do. And it indeed was hot.
So what was your thinking at the time?
Down.
Did you think, this is just a one-off? This will never happen again. This is just once in a lifetime thing. You naive young bastard.
Oh yeah, 1994. We were so naive back then. It was really just. Yeah, there were normal patterns of weather, and sure, some years are going to be hot and some years cool. So, no, I didn't particularly think anything of it at the time. But yeah, so there's reports the UK is having some of the same infrastructure issues they had on the West Coast here in North America. Like train tracks are buckling because they're too hot. Because
I think that's fascinating, Brian. The whole infrastructure question. They're wrapping old bridges in foil because they're not designed for the heat that we're now getting due to climate change. And some of those bridges are going to have a cooling system built into them just to keep the cement from getting too hot because they're not designed for it. That's fascinating. And overnight lows were like 26 degrees. That would kill me too if I didn't have air conditioning. That's a really warm temperature at night to go down to. So you get no relief from the heat. If you're in a building, it's not going to be 26 degrees unless you have a really good fan on the window.
No, presumably, you do, climate and temperature modeling as an engineer when you build these things, and you build them to the normal.
Yeah, but these are hundreds of years
tolerances.
old where they didn't, there was no climate change talked about then. Also, I wanted to say that it hit 40.3 degrees Celsius in the UK is the official high, and it hit 40.2 at 12:50 p.m. on Monday. That was 104.3 Fahrenheit. Oh, and just to lighten things up, I saw a post from a climate person talking about the conspiracy community in Britain talking about this. He said that some believe the hot weather has been manufactured to either distract from or explain COVID vaccine deaths. I don't know how you do that.
How do you do that?
Who is the godlike person who is
temperatures?
creating this heat wave to cover up the COVID deaths? And why would they, allow people to die from COVID vaccine deaths if they could create heat waves? And some think that sun cream is dangerous and full of nanotech. Wow, that's just, Brian, why is the world so crazy? And some people think it's actually freezing cold, and
not everyone.
That this is all a lie, and they haven't come out of their basement. So
Maybe it's mind control. Yeah, like it's not actually hot, but they've
I don't
tapped into
remember
our
people
minds
being
and
so
made us
crazy.
think that it's hot.
What's happened?
Well, maybe we just didn't hear about it
Maybe
back
they're just
then.
fanning the flames on each other, literally. Because I saw a headline that I couldn't explain. It said that there was fires starting throughout London because of the heat. Like, how does that happen? Is it wildfires?
There's
Air conditioners overheating?
there's fires raging near London. I don't know the details, and more fires here in Canada. Again, we're getting a heat wave here as well. And Lytton, BC, which we talked about a year ago, a town in Canada that literally burned to the ground in extreme record temperatures and heat fanning the flames of a big fire. Well, there's more wildfires near where Lytton was, and it's devastating even more of that area with fire and heat once again.
We've said it before, we're not even at the beginning. This is really early stages of climate, and we weren't even expecting to see changes this early. We were talking 2050 or end of the century. We would start to see changes. Now, all of a sudden, it seemed in the last decade or more, we're starting to see climate change real up close.
Yeah, well, really, I guess the starting point was more like
Sure.
1994 when I was traveling through Europe, and it was an unprecedented heat wave. But
This is
we
an
just
interesting
didn't know enough.
stat. Only 1.2% of the Earth's surface is expected to be hotter than the hotspots in the UK. And all of those surfaces, Brian, are deserts. I also found it interesting that my son sent me a text this morning. Shout out to my son. I only have one. Said that it was 18% humidity in London. So we're soaking in humidity here. And in London, it's 18%. It feels like they have our weather, and we have, well, not theirs, but we have their humidity.
No, it really feels like our humidity. We're supposed to be an arid climate here, but it's been very humid.
Now,
the
occasionally
last
in
several summers.
June and early July, we'll get like a California or a Gulf Coast of Mexico flow, and we'll get humid and there'll be tornadoes. But I can't count the number of tornado warnings I've gotten on my phone. We're not in Tornado Valley or Alley rather, but we've
We're
got a lot
adjacent.
of them this year. Apparently, it's like 3 times what it was last year already. So it's a high tornado, and they're pretty weak, and they haven't hurt anybody yet, I don't think. So I don't know. This is something viral that's been on the internet. This is before the heat wave actually hit this week. They had the forecast of Great Britain, what it was going to be this week, and they compared it to a forecast map of Great Britain in 2050 that the Met Office put out previously talking about climate change. And they said in 2050, we could see something as crazy as this. And look at today. It's actually almost identical.
In 2022, we've hit those 2050 predictions.
All right, Brian, this is an important story, I think. It's the Swedish nuclear and wind story from Bloomberg, and only from Bloomberg. Still nobody else has covered this. Their reporting has looked at the economics of this, and because it is a financial a lot of things in climate they're reporting on it because people want to invest in this stuff too. So they want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So the Vattenfall, and I don't pretend to say that properly because I'm not you, okay? Not a Nordic linguist like yourself, a noted one. The Vattenfall power company has curbed the output at 2 of its nuclear reactors north of Stockholm. Sweden has a lot of nuclear and a lot of hydro, so they got a very clean system. So the Nordic Power was trading at its lowest price since November because of gusty winds on the wind turbines. Because wind was putting out so much electricity that the bulk wholesale market of electricity was too low for the power companies. They didn't like that. So the nuclear reactors voluntarily turned down their output to, just like if you would, shut off oil, embargo oil so that oil prices would go up, that type of thing. And this is something that we've talked about on the show for ages, and it's a Tony Seba thing. It's a Rethink X is talked about this a lot. The economics of nuclear are not great right now. Of large-scale nuclear is bad. And the hope that some people have, many people have, including people who listen to our show, is that small modular nuclear reactors will become a viable option in the toolkit. The problem is that they are expensive if they exist. They're only theoretical. And everything I've read and heard is that they would cost a lot unless one company manufactures them. We all settled on this, like one company would mass produce these things and bring the price down, which is only theoretical, and I can't see it happening in the time that we have to fight climate changes, which is 2040, right? I mean, we have to get a lot of things done by between 2040 and 2050 to net zero. And I just don't see that happening. We're not doing it. The companies don't want to buy them. Only governments are investing in small modular nuclear because it's too risky. It's too risky financially. So, yeah, the Nordic power prices have been so low in recent days that the nuclear station curbed its output. So this is something that we talk about. If renewables are cheap and renewables are outcompeting a lot of things like fossil fuels and nuclear, then that makes that stuff more expensive. Because if you have a nuclear reactor, it lasts for, say, 50 years. It is set to operate at a certain level, say 90% of capacity. It is set to do that for 50 years. And that is how much electricity, how much electricity it will produce. And so you know how much per unit of electricity that will produce. And already that is more than everything else. But when you add wind and solar into the mix and say a sunny or windy day, and you turn off the nuclear reactor, then you're making less electricity. And then the less you make, the more expensive per unit of electricity that is. Right? Am I wrong?
It's simple math.
This is something that was predicted to happen in the 2030s, once solar and wind became so abundant that it would start doing this. It's happened. This is the first instance that we know of it happening. And it's a big deal. And people need to understand the economics of the climate fight, because this means we shouldn't be wasting taxpayer money on nuclear. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people are hell-bent on it. My son says cheap. It's not cheap. He says reliable. Yes. Say that to France, whose half their nuclear reactors are offline. And by the way, France is 40 times as much on the wholesale market electricity prices as Sweden because of the reactors being offline. Wow. So 40%, and, the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. So, so they cut down to 69% and 89% of their normal capacity on Friday morning. And capacity has been regulated down by the owners for market-related reasons, said the company spokesperson, which means we're all getting screwed, because when nuclear can't compete with cheaper things, it becomes more expensive. And there's just no way that's not going to happen. I mean, we're at the tip of the iceberg of our deployment of solar and wind. They're going to become potentially solar half as much 10 years from now. In cost, it's been it's like 90% in the last 10 years. So it's a huge deal, Brian.
Yeah, and when there's too much power on the grid, it's got to go somewhere. Like you can't just create too much electricity and have it evaporate into the ether. It's got to be used, or you got to turn it down.
Some of the thoughts of using that excess electricity in a very green grid are production of hydrogen, say for winter electricity production, green hydrogen, manufacturing free electricity to charge your car. Britain has been in that situation where they've given away electricity just in windy winter days. The wind is not a bad thing, people, but that's what we're situated on, and it's you won't hear this anywhere else. You won't hear it other than this show right now. And I'm just not ready to accept nuclear.
Bloomberg.
Sorry. I want to. I'm not against it. Yeah. I'm just saying, do you want to pay 3 times as much for A, or will B work? And the consensus is, even among the young people apparently, is that solar and wind and batteries will work. Like, how much room will it take up? Do people want these wind turbines? What do they don't want a nuclear plant? Do you think nuclear plants in your backyard are popular? Not with anyone. No one's begging for a nuclear plant in their backyard. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous. So, Japan is firing up coal plants. They're firing up their nuclear again, and they're firing up offshore wind. But hopefully they'll catch up.
Yeah, Japan's got some issues this summer. They need more power, so they're trying to, de-mothball some coal. And
so Chevrolet has a brand new EV unveiled.
Yeah, this is the Blazer EV, and I was going to make a joke at the top of the show that, they call it the Blazer because it'll catch on fire or something, because GM, there's a hot take right there, because GM has had some problems with battery fires, but I thought that was a cheap shot, so I didn't do it. But yeah, this looks fairly compelling. So this is a 2023 SUV or CUV
it's fairly
kind
substantial.
Of vehicle.
Let's not make that mistake. Let's set that out here. This is bigger than, it's about the size of a Y, but the Y is actually about the biggest in the market for EVs, isn't it, for that segment?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a decent size, and it's going to start at $45,000 with a range up to 320 miles, which is 514 kilometers, which is absolutely respectable.
It does start at 400 though when they eventually get to the lower trim models, which is similar to, the cars that I'm thinking of buying and you have already.
Yeah, you'll have to go for the more expensive model to get that range. But a lot of the EVs seem to be in the 400 kilometer range. So I'm just excited when anybody's in the 500 kilometer range.
Yeah.
That's super important. Yeah. So, and I don't know if this piques your interest at all, because you're looking at the Chevy Bolt, which is a little smaller. This is a little bigger.
55K in Canada does not pique my interest, Brian, unless something drastically changes. I don't know what that would be. I don't buy lottery tickets. But
this podcast, this is your lottery ticket. It's going to pay off. It's going to pay off, James.
I don't know. We had a bad situation yesterday. My wife took her sister to the hospital with a serious medical condition and had to wait at the ER because all the doctors are on vacation. Her doctor took 2 months off. We've got plenty of people to replace her with at our clinic because it's really well organized. But 2 months, this is pent-up vacation demand, Brian. That's what it is. All the doctors are taking off. So they had to wait like there 9 hours, and then she dropped her phone and someone stole it. Immediately. Stole her phone immediately. And I did a tracking on it and found it at a homeless shelter, at a Salvation Army homeless shelter quite a ways away immediately. So I went there, and my laptop that I was using, her laptop to it died. I was using it to track it. Because she was going to go there and I was going to make it ring and she was going to see who had it. Now she's as we speak, she's putting up a sign that says $40 reward. But, the people can't get into the phones these days. They're protected.
It's kind of pointless.
So now I don't have a phone. She has my phone. It's just chaos. We're just in total chaos here, the family.
Right. And what does
Nothing.
this have to do with the Chevy
Nothing
Blazer?
at all.
I forget.
It's just I see the bill for that cell phone is what I'm saying, and I think I don't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, but my disappointment with the Chevy Blazer is that it only charges at 190 kilowatts, which is way more than a Chevy Bolt, its little sister.
No, I
190
think
is
190
pretty good
fine.
nowadays, but a lot of people are screaming for, when are we going to reach the 350, the 5-minute, 60% charge or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's respectable, but it is a 2024 model. It's not today. It doesn't have 190. It's, a year from now it'll have that. It'll be 24. It'll be out a year from now, by the way, for 2024. And it is on the Ultium, the new platform. So they're talking about sort of doing away possibly with the Chevy Bolt, not emphasizing it as much. So a lot of the owners are buzzing about that. Should I buy one? Should I keep it if they're not going to have the parts? Or, so they got rid of the Volt with a V. That only lasted a few years. They quite happily got rid of that. So I guess we'll see. But it's probably $55,000 in Canada just for the base. So one day on the used market, who knows? I wonder what its towing capacity is. They didn't announce that yet. A lot of the specs aren't on that.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. But also very quickly in EV news, Volkswagen has delivered 217,000 battery electric vehicles in the first half of 2022. So they're on track for about 500,000 EVs this year, which is quite respectable. Tesla's more up in the 1.5 million kind of range these days. So, they're not quite catching up, but that's a 27% increase over last year. So, EV production is ramping up.
Okay, why don't we skip the next one and go to the Bloomberg reports?
Okay, so back to the power grid and the problems with the power grid. Bloomberg, again, is reporting that Texas power plants are running nonstop. So this is the hot summertime in Texas. As we know, they had some difficulties with their grid last winter when things got too cold. And the Texas power grid is unique because it's kind of self-contained. It doesn't really talk to the other states or even provinces in Canada like other grids do. They're kind of an island. And they're running nonstop. They're skipping planned maintenance at these power plants in Texas because there's just huge demand and they do not have time to skip. So also, like fairly recently, Tesla announced a virtual grid project in Texas. So this is, they're doing something similar in California. So with the software and the Tesla Powerwalls for home power, they're all connected together in a sense through the grid. So they're trying out a virtual grid project for all of these Tesla batteries to be able to work in unison to supply power to the grid in Texas when things get dicey, when the grid needs power. So we'll see. We were wondering too about possible brownouts here in our home province of Saskatchewan.
We did set a record, by the way.
So far.
A new record last week, yeah.
Is that right? Record power use?
I saw that in the newspaper.
Yeah, because it was super hot. It's now cooled down a bit, so we won't have to worry about this for the immediate future. But we'll just kind of keep an eye on that and see if they can keep the grid on in Texas and keep the grid on here in Saskatchewan.
This is from the Texas Monthly that I'll just add quickly, is that solar power is bailing out the Texas grid. Output from solar has doubled this summer, last summer, doubled in Texas. Doubled in 1 year.
Wow. No, and solar works great for things like air conditioning because when you need the air conditioning tends to be when the sun is out.
And it's up 3 times over the last 18 months. But Brian, that brings us to the lightning round. Yes, it's time for the lightning round. A fast look at the rest of the week's headlines in clean energy and climate change. Brian, the American Federation of Teachers, 1.7 million strong, wants to divest their pensions from fossil fuels. Good for them.
Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't done it already.
Sources are
Get on
telling
it,
journalists
teachers.
that President Biden could declare a climate emergency as soon as Wednesday of this week. What does that mean? Does it mean anything?
I don't know what that means. It's, I don't know. I guess language does matter. Language does help. So if he declares that.
They say it's in response of
that'll
giving
help
up
a
on the
little.
climate legislation because of Manchin. May he rot in hell. And I don't know what it does, though. I mean, wording is important, as you say, but I don't think it's not like if you declare an emergency after a hurricane, you get funding. Well, maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe.
Right. No.
We'll talk about that more in the coming weeks. A new report finds that once again, wind and solar, including storage and transmission costs, are the cheapest source of electricity in Australia by far. So coal plants running in Australia are wasting the taxpayers' money and health as well. And by the way, Brian, I was in the middle of the city, our city of 200,000 people, dead center last night at 8 o'clock, and I smelled the refinery from the edge of town because there was a northeast wind. And so that's half the city covered in carcinogens. Good luck to you people. Alok Sharma, a UK cabinet minister who led last year's COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, has threatened to quit if Boris Johnson's replacement ditches current commitments to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. This is something we've talked about before. The anti-climate people in Canada were talking about Boris Johnson. It just shows if you go for net zero that you'll get booted. Well, that's not why he's getting booted. Largely the population's on board. And how the hell do you think they're going to feel now politically after today? I mean, my God. The 5 politicians who are still in the race to succeed Mr. Johnson as leader are not proposing to scrap climate emissions altogether, but they are talking a lot about, sticking up for the consumer, which shines maybe a negative light on what they might do as far as the levy on electricity and things like that to pay for climate change things.
And I do worry about like a change of government here in Canada because the carbon tax that we were talking about earlier, it seems like a fairly good scheme and it's mapped out to, 2030 or 2040. But if there's a change of government here in Canada, they could elect to just get rid of that.
Elon Musk and Tesla lay down a 2 terawatt hour lithium ion capacity challenge to Panasonic. That is 4 times the industry size today. So, Brian, what's going on here? Is this for grid storage or is it just for cars? What do you think this need and cry to Panasonic is about?
Well, I think it's for both. I mean, it's, there's an insatiable demand for batteries. So if Panasonic can make 2 terawatt hours of batteries, Tesla will buy them. That's basically all they're saying. And whether they'll put them in cars or grid storage is yet to be seen.
By the way, how many battery mega factory
getting them
announcements
made.
were there in the last 2 weeks? It's insane. It's like the sun will come up today. It's a regular thing now. And, if you're not paying attention, if you're one of most of the people at Brian's hair salon, you're not going to understand what's going on. It's crazy. And if you think that that's not going to bring down battery costs if we, exponentially raise the amount of batteries being made and the incremental improvements we're making, such as 20% in the next 8 years, battery energy density is by one manufacturer. Okay, Ars Technica, if Volkswagen ends up making EV batteries in the United States, which they say they may, they'll do so with parts recycled from older lithium-ion cells. So already, even though there's not a lot of batteries out there, because, like my car's 10 years old, am I going to recycle the battery? No, it's still going strong. Thanks to a new collaboration with Redwood Materials, and that is the person who was with Tesla originally and started that company?
Yeah. J.B. Straubel, one of the founders of Tesla, he's got this new company, Redwood Materials, and their whole thing is going to be recycling batteries. And it is, kind of a small deal at the moment because there aren't that many batteries to recycle, but looks like a great partnership with Volkswagen here because, they need battery materials.
So Elon had mentioned something about recycling
batteries
batteries this week. He said, if you think it's not valuable, it's like you're looking at pure ore, you're looking at pure minerals that are already the best that they can be recycled. So you don't have to refine them that much. You know, the original recycling to get the purest form of them is already taken care of when you recycle these things. So once the fleet is full of electric vehicles, you recycle everything, and well, most of everything, not 100%, but you know, very close to that, hopefully. And because it's also going to be the economical thing to do. It's a lot cheaper to recycle than it is to mine new copper, for example. From Bloomberg New Energy Finance, 19 countries have reached the 5% tipping point of EV adoption. That is the sale of EVs in the new car buying mix. And that includes the United States. If the U.S. follows that trend, then a quarter of all new car sales will be electric by 2025. Brian, the surprising state for me, Utah at 7%. That's pretty good. That's above average.
Interesting.
Utah. Congratulations. If you're listening in Utah, send us a note. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com.
Yeah, please.
From the text, I'm going to skip that. New York Times. For every 1,000 people alive on Earth, 973 are regularly inhaling fossil fuel toxins, especially in the city where we live. Only 27 are not out of those 1,000 people. Regularly. Regularly, Brian. Regularly.
So pretty much everybody.
And yet, what did I see in front of me the other day on the road? A car with a sticker that said, "I support oil and gas workers because my truck doesn't run on fairy dust and unicorn piss." I mean, come on. I was driving an EV behind him, and he's stating that it's not possible to drive it anything other than that it's a fantasy. It was so absurd, Brian. It was one of the most absurd moments of my life. It's ridiculous. And people are so stupid. What does he think? His lights run on unicorn dust? I mean, and then do fairies urinate, or is it just unicorns? Okay, the GF Energy is to build the second U.S. nailable solar shingle factory to meet growing demand. We're always talking about solar shingles from Tesla, and they're struggling. It's expensive, and they're not making very money. But this is an actual shingle maker which got into this in the last year, and now there's so much demand for it that they're building a second factory. And what happens then? The price goes down. I'm sorry, this thing is crazy. It's hard to even keep up. Finally, this week.
Yeah, I would love to be able to get a solar roof.
Absolutely. And it will tend to be a bit more expensive for a while, I think, a bit pricey. And finally this week, Brian, Electric's Fred Lambert has had FSD beta, the full self-driving beta software for self-driving Teslas, as long as you. And he has this to say: computer vision is impressive and detects its environment well, but decision-making is still equivalent to a 14-year-old who has been learning to drive for the last week and appears to consume hard drugs at times. Do you agree or disagree? Is that too harsh?
Yeah, no, that's about right. It's you know, you and I went for that drive, and it was you should have a learner driver.
That's our time for
on the
this week. If you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your podcast app to get new episodes delivered every week. We like to hear from you. Contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. On Twitter and TikTok, we are Clean Energy Pod, and we're on YouTube, where you can watch our show and see special features and clips. And you can leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. Look forward to talking to you next week.
See you.